Please don't watch it alone. Like, share, and subscribe only if you dare to listen this type of stories regularly. It was supposed to be just a dare. Stupid, harmless dare. But now, as I stood in front of the old abandoned school, I regretted ever agreeing to it. The building loomed in front of me, its dark, broken windows staring back like hollow eyes. The once bright red bricks were now faded and covered in grime, and the metal gates hung open, creaking slightly in the wind. The place reeked of neglect and decay. Everyone in our small town knew about the old school. It had been shut down for years, ever since that terrible accident. No one liked to talk about it, but the stories were impossible to avoid. People said that the school was haunted, that the spirits of the children who died in the fire still wandered the halls, looking for someone to play with. I had always dismissed those stories as just that, stories. But now, standing in front of the school, I wasn't so sure. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "It's just an old building," I muttered to myself. "Nothing to be afraid of." But my voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. I knew I couldn't back out now. The others were waiting for me, watching from a distance, eager to see if I'd actually go through with it. If I chickened out, I'd never hear the end of it. With a final glance back at my friends, I pushed open the gate and stepped inside. The air was cold and still, and the only sound was the crunch of dead leaves under my feet. I approached the front doors, which were slightly ajar, and with a push, I entered the building. The inside of the school was worse than I had imagined. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of mold and rot filled my nostrils. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dimly lit by the weak sunlight filtering through the dirty windows. Lockers lined the walls, their doors hanging open, revealing old, forgotten books and crumpled papers. The floor was littered with debris, and I had to step carefully to avoid tripping over broken tiles and loose wires. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I ventured further inside. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling or the distant sound of dripping water. I could feel the weight of the school's history pressing down on me, as if the walls themselves were remembering the screams and the flames that had once filled these halls. I walked slowly, my footsteps echoing through the empty corridor. Every now and then, I would stop and listen, convinced that I had heard something. Whispers, footsteps, a door creaking somewhere in the distance. But every time, it was just my imagination, or so I told myself. As I turned a corner, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. At the end of the hall was a classroom, the door wide open. The room was darker than the rest of the school, the windows covered in grime, blocking out most of the light. But what caught my attention wasn't the darkness. It was the small, flickering light coming from inside. Curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously approached the classroom. As I drew closer, I realized that the light was coming from an old, battered lantern sitting on one of the desks. The flame inside flickered weakly, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. I hesitated at the doorway, peering inside. The room was filled with dusty desks and chairs, all arranged as if a class could start at any moment. The chalkboard at the front of the room still had faded writing on it, though I couldn't make out what it said. The only thing out of place was the lantern, and the small, leather-bound notebook lying next to it. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped inside. I knew I should just turn around and leave, but something compelled me to stay. I reached out and picked up the notebook, brushing off the dust. The cover was worn and cracked, but it had once been a rich brown, and I could see faint, gold lettering on the front. I opened it, and the pages crackled softly under my fingers. The handwriting inside was neat, almost delicate, and as I read the first few lines, a chill ran through me. I don't know if anyone will ever read this, but if you do, please understand that I had no choice. They're still here, in the walls, in the shadows. They whispered to me, calling my name. I tried to ignore them, but they wouldn't leave me alone. I can't escape. They're watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. I stopped reading, my hands trembling. The words on the page seemed to pulse, as if alive, and I suddenly had the overwhelming sense that I was being watched. I glanced around the room, but nothing had changed. The shadows danced along the walls, flickering in the lantern's weak light. Then I heard it, a soft, barely audible whisper coming from somewhere behind me. My breath caught in my throat, and I slowly turned around, my heart pounding in my ears. The classroom was empty, just as it had been when I entered. But the whispering continued, growing louder, more insistent. It was a child's voice, faint and distant, but I couldn't make out what it was saying. I backed away, my eyes wide with fear. The whispers grew louder, filling the room, and I could feel the air growing colder, the shadows closing in around me. I dropped the notebook, the pages fluttering as it hit the floor, and I stumbled towards the door. But as I reached the doorway, the door suddenly slammed shut, trapping me inside. I grabbed the handle and twisted it frantically, but it wouldn't budge. The whispering was all around me now, the voices overlapping, growing more urgent. I pressed myself against the door, my heart racing, and then I heard it. My name, clear as day, spoken in a voice that was neither childlike nor adult, but something in between. "Help us." The words sent a jolt of terror through me, and I pounded on the door, desperate to get out. The lantern flickered wildly, casting strange, twisting shadows on the walls. I could feel the presence of something in the room with me, something cold and dark, closing in. Finally, with one last desperate push, the door flew open, and I stumbled out into the hallway. I didn't stop to look back. I ran as fast as I could, my footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. The whispering followed me, growing fainter as I put more distance between myself and the classroom, but it never completely faded. I burst out of the school, gasping for breath, and didn't stop running until I was back in the safety of my own home. My friends were gone, the dare long forgotten, and I was left alone with the memories of what I had seen and heard. I never went back to the old school after that night. I didn't need to. The voices stayed with me, haunting my dreams, whispering to me in the dead of night. No one believed me when I told them what had happened. They just laughed, saying it was my imagination, that the old school was just a building, nothing more. But I knew the truth. I had seen the darkness that lurked within those walls, felt the presence of the restless spirits trapped inside. And I knew that they were still there, waiting for the next fool to wander into their domain, waiting for someone to help them.